Well, we do have a lot to get through today. Our friends with Boy with a Ball asked us to share one of our tools that us at the Maclellan Foundation use to when we work with our partners. So we're here to share that with you. Randy will be sharing some of that. My name is Eduardo Centurion. You'll get to meet Randy Kennedy or Randall Kennedy here in a few minutes. But I wanted to give a little bit of a context about who we are, what it is, a little bit about what we do. You can definitely go look a little bit more if you want to go on the internet and look up what Maclellan does, maclellan.net. But we are stewards. We're stewards of God's resources that God has given to a family and their foundation. And those are some key dates. But two that I really want to highlight is 1945 is when the foundation was founded as an organization that gave to solve some problems in our city, which is Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the other date I wanted to talk about today, just to be brief, is 2006 and 2007. That was the first year where Randy and another colleague of mine, kind of 7 months of where they hired executive or regional directors to oversee regional strategies. So we went from a foundation that was solely focused on one city to then figuring out from 46 to 2006, we were doing a lot of things all over the world. In 2006 to 2007, we said, hey, let's get very strategic about regions of the world. So as you can see, those are the 8 regions of the world where that's very small print, but you can see some of that on the website. We're in 8 regions. Chattanooga is a region of itself. United States, Latin America is our newest region. Europe, Africa, MENA, Asia, Southeast Asia. But what does it mean that we steward God's resources through this foundation? What do we think God is calling us to do? We think of this as building a bridge. So we want to see sustainable kingdom growth everywhere with all of our partners, all of our. We're not out doing ministry. We partner with those that are advancing God's kingdom. So we want to see local strategies that grow the local church, funded locally in every one of those 8 regions. And we think of it as 2 sides of a bridge where we want to see organizations meet with those that are going to resource their ideas. So we want to equip local ministry, and we want to release local resources. So that's our big theory of change. That's where we think if we build this bridge in those 8 regions of the world, if we help build that, that's what God has called us to do. So before I let Randy talk about a specific tool, this is kind of what we mean by that. So we've done a lot of work, especially on the Equip Local Ministries. We have 79 years. We're getting close to 80 years of history of partnering, and we've learned some things along the way. Neither Randy nor I have been there for 79 years. I've been there 10 years. Randy's been there a little bit longer, closer to 20 years now. We've learned some things along the way, and this is kind of the fruit of that. Is when we talk about what does it mean to be a healthy organization, how do we steward our collective resources to equip an organization in these 9 dimensions. That's one of the ways that we think of building the local ministry side, equipping local ministry side of the bridge. The other is we do traditional project funding. We're doing a lot of that in Latin America as we get to know organizations. We're not looking at the internal capacities. We're looking at what are you guys doing out in the kingdom? Let's fund those projects. Let's get to know each other. But our goal is we want them to be the best organization that God's called them to be. And that's one way we can measure where they are. The other side is we want generous people all over the world. We want to discover who are those generous kingdom givers all over the world. So we invest a lot of energy in bringing people together to fund God's kingdom. We have a lot of tools where we want to see collaboration. We want ministries to think about how do we integrate generosity into everything that we do. We've been talking a little bit about that with Boy with a Ball. It's like, what does generosity and a culture of generosity look like within your organization? How do you articulate that? And then we have some partners around the world that do this kind of discipleship. So that's the context, and I feel like I'm speeding through this is because we really do want to get that to this tool that Randy will spend some time talking. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, we've done a lot of work on the Equip Local Ministries. You guys may know either organizations that you support, maybe organizations that your church is implementing in their own communities. We think this is a great resource for a lot of ministries. We grant to about 400 organizations around the globe. This allows us to invest in 30,000 organizations around the world. These are free resources. Go check out 54 Collective. It'll give you a little bit deeper explanation on those 9 dimensions of capacity for a nonprofit organization. But Randy's going to come in here and tell you a little bit about a tool that we use when we talk to organizations, when we seek to understand both what God has called them to do, and we want them to articulate what's the theory of change that God's called you into, and how do you know you're achieving it. So Randy's going to talk to us about NISO. So that's it. Sorry I breezed through it, but time is on our side. Let's go.
Yeah. They told us we had 50 minutes. I'm like, I usually do this as a 2-day seminar. So it's gonna be a fire hose. But I tried. You guys are super smart, and I knew that. So I only put in the really hard parts. This was just to give me a little credibility in your eyes, maybe. I had 15 years in the communication and software industry. Then I was 10 years with Campus Crusade. I oversaw all fundraising for Campus Crusade for 10 years, and then I joined the foundation. So the way I've looked at it is God has positioned me to do what I do now by giving me business experience, ministry experience, and now I'm operating kind of in both realms. And that's, I've been married 42 years, almost 43 now, to my dear wife Mary, 2 kids and a granddaughter. Okay, that gives me some credibility too, I hope. Okay, so this thing we call the NISO framework. By the way, I can send these slides to you so you don't have to try to write everything down, take pictures and screens, because I know what that's like, and I never do a very good job taking notes. NISO framework was developed by a guy named Pat Maclellan, who works for Traxia Partners, which is an Atlanta-based company, actually. He was also on the board of Campus Crusade, he's a brilliant man. He came up with this framework to help ministries learn how to think in a way that made it easy for them to make their case to people who might fund them and potential partners, but also to help them realize that there was a lot to do in terms of aligning your organization with its mission, and how do you deliver on that. So this NISO stands for Need, Idea, Strategy, and Organization. I'm going to go through some of those ideas with you. If you have a question, we're going to try to have questions at the end, but honestly at the time, just speak up or raise your hand or something and interrupt me, and we'll try to go like that. Does that sound all right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's 2 things going on. You already heard Eddie talk about this. We've got a movement of generosity. We've been seeing this happening around the world. I think in the United States, we started something called Generous Giving in year 2000. And I think the last I heard, it's released something like $5 billion in new giving. So there's a lot of wealth in the Christian community, but they don't understand necessarily God's calling in their lives to use that wealth for his purposes. So generous giving is trying to help that happen. And also we're seeing a change in how donors view ministry. So used to it was the old school way was, I trust you, I'll give you the money, you go do what you do. Now they're wanting to know how you're doing it, where you're doing it, how do you know you're effective, all these kinds of questions. And so in the younger generations, even more interested in that and being engaged in it, whereas the old school days was, I just mail it to you and that's the last I think about it, right? So those paradigms are changing. People are thinking about investment instead of giving. They see themselves as stewards, not donors. And they want accountability, not just possibility. I heard there's a guy named Ansel Condrey. He's the former CEO of ExxonMobil, pretty smart guy. He met with a ministry leader, and the ministry leader says, you like to fund ministries that have a big vision, right? And he said, no, I fund ministries that get things done. And that's that. Big vision doesn't mean anything if you can't execute against it. So the whole idea of the NISO framework is to help you line up so you can, in fact, execute it successfully. So you guys have all heard of the logic model, the outcome model. You know this one? So you've got inputs and resources. This is what the organization already has: people, assets, some funds. Then you've got the activities. These are the tactics or the methods or the way they execute their ministry. These are like trainings and travel and conferences like this. These are tactics, right? Or activities. Then you've got what are called outputs. So a classic example of an output is, I will train 1,000 people, and at the end of the training you say, I trained 980 people. That was your goal, was 1,000, you got 980. That's an output. That's not. Nothing's changed yet, right? Except 980 people attended your training. So what you really want to know is, what were the value add? What happened because of the training? That's what we call an outcome. You guys know this, like this is not new to you, I hope. And this is we actually see what we hope to see happen. But still, that's good, but the real goal is to create impact, which actually I don't know where that is. It's supposed to be right here, Eddie.
Yeah.
Impact.
2 slides.
And then a really important feature of this thing is that there's some kind of feedback loop in this logic model that informs you, based on what you're seeing here, what you should be doing over here. All right? And this is one place where you see ministries slip a lot. They've been doing it, worked really well 25 years ago, and they're still doing it today. And it doesn't work that well now. But because they're not looking back and not evaluating and not being creative, which we've been hearing about from up front, they start kind of losing the plot, and they become less and less effective and harder to get funded. So these are the two side by side. So the NISO model, there's need, idea, strategy, and organizational capacity. That's a strategic communication, and the outcome model is a tactical or planning methodology. This can be organizational, this can be regional, this can be project-based, whatever it is. These things happen as a broad expression of what you're trying to accomplish, and this is the specifics. So they go hand in hand. I see people do this all the time and cannot tell me anything about that very effectively. And I'll show you why that happens in a second. So far, so good? I am really going quick, and I apologize. Okay, so remember the 4 parts were need, idea, strategy, and organization. We say NISO, other people say it should be NISO, but then that'd be too nice. So what's the need? The first step is to identify significant need, opportunities that go with your specific goals. Okay, the need. I'll sit down with the ministry and I'll say, who's your target audience? And they'll go, everyone. Oh, what's your mission? The Great Commission. How do you know you're succeeding? When Jesus comes back. Is that fundable? Seriously, is that fundable? Would you fund that? Right? I hear this all the time. So the first thing we have to do is help a ministry understand how to define the problem they're seeking to solve. Who are those people? One question I'll ask a ministry leader is, who are you going to walk past to get to the person you're walking to? If you don't know how to do that, then you're going to mission creep. You're going to end up starting. When I was with Campus Crusade, we had 78 separate ministries under the umbrella of Campus Crusade. Impossible to manage. And after Dr. Bright passed away, Steve Douglas whittled that way down. And so we had this 2-man ministry over here. That's not what Campus Crusade does. God bless you. Go do that somewhere else. And so on. Because mission creep happens. And everybody knows this. So one very important idea around a strategic framework at the organizational level is you have a clear idea of what it is you're trying to actually do. Who are you trying to reach? I'm trying to reach the mightily speaking people of North India who live in these 5 districts. I know who I'm trying, and I'm trying to plant churches there. That's a good definition of a need. Alpha International, the guys out of London, if you know them, they said their goal in England was the 26-year-old unchurched man. Well, when you've got that level of definition, guess what's happened in England? Many young men are coming to faith, and churches are being started because they're clear about what. So then everything else they do to get to that. So what I try to get an organization to do is give me what they call an elevator pitch. Everybody know what an elevator pitch is? Okay, so you get in the elevator, the guy you've always wanted to talk to gets in, you got 5 floors. What are you gonna say to him? If it takes you 2.5 minutes to describe your need, you don't understand your need well enough. So that's what this need is. So if you can sit down with the ministry partner you're working with, or with your own organization, and can I put in 2 sentences what the need is I'm trying to address? Can I say it in a minute? If you can't, you need to keep working on it till it's really tight. So far, so good? I know it's not rocket science, but it's actually kind of hard to do sometimes. I didn't read everything to you. I assume you know how to read. Okay. Then what's the idea? Okay, the idea is the idea innovative, idea to address that need. In other words, what is my solution? People call this the theory of change. People call it lots of things. What is the solution, if I implement, will address that need? Does it address it fully? How do you know? Those kind of questions. So the idea is as simple as that. It aligns with the identified need and strategic goals in such a way that it actually meets the objective. So the guy who's trying to reach this unreached people group in North India can show you through a series of activities that if he does these things, he actually does succeed in planning a church. Or Alpha can show you how by using this video and this venue with this invitation, I get the people I want in the room and I can reach them. I know how to do it. This idea works. That's the idea of the idea. So a way to understand this is through this comparison of need and idea. So if you see this one, this is what we call a sound idea. The idea is the same size as the need. It approaches that, it addresses it. It's a growth-bound idea. The idea actually isn't sufficient to meet the need. It'll be part of it, but it won't fully address the need. And it's just a visual way to look at it. Then you've got an underdeveloped idea. It's the right idea. You just need to work on it some more to make it actually hit on all cylinders and do what you want it to do. And then finally, you've got an overstated idea. You hear this a lot from ministry leaders. This is the greatest thing, but it's overstated. It actually is smaller than the actual need is. There's 2 ways to address that. What would those be? Either get a new idea, or maybe you're trying to do too much, and you need to narrow that target need. So it doesn't have to always be one way. But the idea is alignment. This also helps you align people in your organization to the right tasks. When you're really clear about what they do, you look at their capacity and their giftings, and you help people in the right, be in the right place on the bus as the organization goes forward. So far, so good. It's actually a really easy idea. It's a little harder to actually do, but it's a pretty easy idea. So now, this is the idea then is the NISO framework has everything lining up. So flowing from the organization up to the need, up to the target audience. See the concept there? And they're all the same idea. So the next thing is the strategy. So what is the strategy? Somebody tell me. You've all been nodding a lot, so I assume you know the answer.
How you're gonna do it.
Yeah,
what's the plan?
What's the execution of the idea? So the idea is, right, you execute the idea, and if you execute it well, you'll address the need. If you execute it poorly, then the idea is not fully implemented, therefore your need's not reached. So it's a principle driven. So a robust strategy is essential to turn ideas into reality. Effective strategy does these things. First of all, back to the same kind of language, clear and specific and measurable objectives. You understand what you need to do to implement that idea. Again, you'll see this come apart when you're having a conversation with some ministries. Even in some businesses, you see that they don't have a very clear strategy. You know, they're so in love with their product, they haven't thought about will anybody actually buy it? You know, they fall in love with the product, or they fall in love with their system or their training or whatever, and they don't actually have a good execution strategy. So you got to break down all the objectives and action steps with milestones. You have to allocate your resources well, and you got to constantly remain, people call it, that's a long way to saying agile. You have to be willing, you have to be able to adjust to reality. So what happens often is somebody will have a lovely MISO model in place, and it's working. And then the ground changes underneath their feet, right? COVID is a big example, but there's lots of other ones. Social media comes out, and so what used to work with your cassette tape ministry doesn't work now. Or, all the easy examples, but it happens usually quite quietly. You don't actually notice this change is going on, and then you start having poor reactions, responses, impact over time. So you have to constantly reevaluate this to say, hey, is the idea to address this need work still? Is the need even still there? Have we succeeded? Or have the environment changed in such a way that that's actually not a need anymore? So this kind of thing happens. The strategy, though, is extraordinarily important, but it's actually one of the easier things to do once you've done the hard work of defining the need and the idea. Then it becomes pretty evident. Okay, well, we need to do these things to do it. So here's some attributes of a good strategy. Focuses on outcomes, outputs, versus outputs and activities, that logic model. It's creative, it's logical, it's simple, straightforward, easy to understand, it's believable, it reflects reality, the lay of the land. It's focused, it's flexible. So far, so good? Mm-hmm. Probably going too fast now. Okay, so then we get to the real heart of the issue. And that's the organization. All the stuff Eddie mentioned earlier about the 54 collective, capacity, all these things is because ultimately what you're funding is the organization. Right? It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. The Tower of Pisa, at some point infrastructure actually matters. They didn't get the foundation right on that tower, right? So over time, I've been there. Have anybody been there? At the top of it actually you try to start bending it back up, back up the street. So the tower actually goes like this and then kind of does that at the very end. So it does matter. It's organizational capacity, when it gets right down to it, is what we end up looking at the hardest. If we believe your framework makes sense, we agree with your direction, it aligns with our direction, this is where we focus our time. What's the leadership look like? What's your governance look like? Your evaluations, how do you staff? How do you do all these things? So this is one thing, I'm going to try to do this easily. When we look at a leader or the governance or leadership of an organization, we look at these four quadrants, but really we just look at two. Okay, and on this axis is it important? High importance, higher up here, lower importance down here. And then this axis is the urgency. So it's low urgency on this end and high urgency on this end. So the reason why we don't look at these two, because why would I look at something that's not important and low urgency? Or here, why would I look at something that's high urgency and unimportant? Right? So if this is just not interesting to us. So up here though, you've got these are driven by urgency and importance. So they can be equally important, but one's more urgent than the other. Right? And so on. So what we look for in an organizational leader is somebody who knows how to think in this quadrant. It's long-term, it's future-centric, it's planning ahead. So a good example, if I'm operating a ministry and we have trucks, and these trucks, we rely on those trucks to get back and forth to the location where we're doing the work. And I never check the tires on those trucks because everything's urgent. Then one day, truck tire blows out, it's 200 miles anywhere, it costs me a fortune to get out there to replace those tires. I have to pay top notch, top dollar. That's a great example of a quadrant 2 thinker. Everything's urgent, and I'm always working in the moment. I'm never looking over the horizon at what's happening. So all this is trying to explain is these things, they're necessary, but if you're not in this space, you're not asking the question, what business should I be in? Over here you're saying, what business am I in? Versus where I should be. My parameters are possibilities, not probabilities. Fundamental direction and positioning, this is just implementation and execution. So you see the difference. Quadrant 1 thinkers are the kind of leaders you look for. That doesn't mean, because they can have good lieutenants that can do this part. But if you don't have somebody thinking this way, eventually the ministry is going to become less effective. And it's going to be a higher cost to operate. And really good people will leave, and so all you'll have left are the B players, not the A players. Because they're tired of burning out. Make sense? So the capacity is what you use to execute the idea. Your capacity is what lets you do the strategy, build the tools for the need to address for the idea to address the need, and they're in alignment. When you look at capacity, it's the ability to execute the strategy, and then we evaluate the leadership, we look at the workforce, their systems, we look at the resource availability and their operational efficiency, and we look at enhancing capacity through leader development, talent management, technology integration, process optimization. These are all normal organizational actions that you would take to make an organization strong. The things we see the most, outside of the US at least, are organizations that don't have a good governance model. They've got a single leader who's trying to run the whole thing from his desk or from her desk. And so you get into the type 2 thinking because everything's on fire, everything's got to be done. What we want to see instead is good governance, like with a board that the executive reports to, and the board understands their role and the executive understands his or her role, so that the organization can run with good strategic leadership involved. And an executive needs to have a board that can take ideas to, validate concepts, propose strategy changes, propose missional changes. Without that, then you've seen it, they get to a point and then usually they crash. And if they don't crash, they age out. And now you've got a person who really should step down, but because no one can take their role because they've done everything, they can't leave, but they don't want to stay. You know what I'm saying? You see it all the time. So governance is one of the things we see is the biggest challenge in the developing world with regard to ministry organizational capacity. Because once you've got that in place, the thing gets healthier, and then they're more fundable because the people who live around them say, that's well run. Because everybody knows